My history with King Kong and Godzilla dates all the way back to 1999 with the Matthew Broderick film of Godzilla, as well as the 2005 Peter Jackson extended epic King Kong. So, for Godzilla, I would say my favorite Godzilla film is the 2014 reboot of Godzilla that kind of took off and started the MonsterVerse. And the reason I say that is because the 2014 film Godzilla, a lot of people panned it really bad for basically the ambiguity for the monster and it relying on human story, and that's about it. For me, I'm actually the complete opposite. I really appreciated the ambiguity towards the monster. I really appreciated the special effects combined with the ambiguity, where you would see a limb here and there and some smoke, and then at some point you would see Godzilla's face and him howling in the air. And I really appreciated that, even up to the end, the last act where he went all out facing the giant monsters. They still held a sense of ambiguity in the fight sequences. Now, I was a little kid when I saw the 1999 Matthew Broderick Godzilla film. Since I was a kid, it was fun, but I acknowledge the fact that it's been hardcore panned since its release. I never went back and rewatched it, and that's exactly why. Now, my favorite King Kong film is the 2005 Peter Jackson extended epic. And so much so that I own it, not just on Blu-ray, but also on 4K. And the reason for that is because the King Kong 2005 epic had it all. It had a great mesmerizing human story, which is really unbelievable for a monster story. It had a really incredible and really involving human story that combined with King Kong's jungle story, and it all just kind of meshed and blended very well together. It added and had some deep history for the King Kong lore. It had a lot of insects, a lot of fantastic looking creatures and environments and landscapes, and that's all in due part of Peter Jackson and his filming. I love Peter Jackson's films, so those are the biggest reasons why the 2005 King Kong is my favorite King Kong film. Now, going past the 2014 Godzilla, we get Kong Skull Island from 2017. Kong Skull Island was basically a King Kong from 2005 with an absorbing human story ripped out, absorbing personal characters for the humans ripped out, a gorilla size scoped into epic proportions, and a lot of illogical plotting. Now, with Kong Skull Island, you'll still have a sense of fun when you're watching Kong Skull Island, but it was really super dumbed down, and the reason being is because they were fitting it into the new MonsterVerse, featuring King Kong, featuring Godzilla, featuring soon-to-be King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra. I won't spoil any more, but Kong Skull Island was basically a really dumbed-down version of the 2005 epic King Kong. And then fast forward, Godzilla King of Monsters. So Kong Skull Island, I would probably give between a 5 to a 6 because of reasons already stated. Godzilla King of Monsters was the bottom of the barrel with everything having to do with Godzilla. Godzilla King of Monsters had some good action sequences, but 95% of the film was filled with a staggeringly dumb way of filming, not just in the action sequences, but in the writing, in the direction, the filming, the writing, the story. the plot, everything about Godzilla King of Monsters was just abysmal. It was terribly bad. It was horrendous. Even the action sequences in Godzilla King of Monsters were so poorly done. They were poorly edited, poorly shot. The landscapes, the environments, the way they filmed it was just, the visuals, everything was so muddled, muddy, just all around bad. You could barely even watch Godzilla King of Monsters and even know what's going on. It was basically like they brought Michael Bay in to direct a monster flick. They didn't, but that's what it seems like. And it's sad because Godzilla King of Monsters had Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, other monsters from the Monsterverse that they didn't really flesh out too much on. Just kind of a point in the story where they just kind of did an uprising because King Ghidorah summoned them, but that was about it for all of the extras. So I would say Godzilla King of Monsters is hands down the weakest, at least in the last 20 years, of King Kong, Godzilla, and monster films. I would say Godzilla King of Monsters was hands down the weakest so far. So now, today, we get the new release, Godzilla vs. King Kong. Now, I watched this on HBO Max, and what I do have to preface with first is by initially stating that the way they advertised Godzilla vs. King Kong, perfect. They advertised it remarkably. Okay, literally the title suggests exactly what it's supposed to be. Godzilla vs. King Kong. They advertised it exactly as such. They gave you the trailers exactly as such. They literally had 100% opportunity to give you not necessarily a brainless or dumb action flick, but an action flick consisting of nothing but Godzilla versus King Kong. And they had that opportunity, and did they achieve that opportunity? They 100% did not achieve that opportunity. Godzilla vs. King Kong is about an hour and 46 minutes. And of the hour and 46 minutes, I would say maybe half of Godzilla vs. King Kong deals with action sequences. Okay, the beginning of Godzilla vs. King Kong is absolutely excellently directed. It's excellently written and directed. Okay, it's a very fun intro. It's so well directed and very well shot and edited. The intro of Godzilla vs. King Kong starts out with King Kong kind of just waking up, and you go through a day in his life, and it features new young girl who is deaf and speaks to him. They kind of implemented the original King Kong story with a girl that he kind of has a friendship with and falls in love with, and vice versa. They implemented that into this film story as well, and that's fine. I actually liked that part of the story. That's about the only part of the story that I liked about Godzilla vs. King Kong. I did not go into Godzilla vs. King Kong looking for even just a story. I honestly went into Godzilla vs. King Kong for exactly that. Godzilla vs. King Kong. And this is the one and only time that I will use that as the exception. I wanted just straight up action. And the director even stated that if it were longer, it would have a lot more of just the human story. So I thought to myself, okay, so because it's a little panda and shortened, I would be expecting at least 75% of Godzilla vs. King Kong being exactly that. It's not. It's maybe 40 to 50% Godzilla vs. King Kong, among other plotting for the action sequences. Other positives I can say is they really build up, especially King Kong and the despair in his life that he's going through. I really appreciate that they focused on King Kong and his life, and it kind of is a crappy life because he's kind of manipulated in every sense of the word. He doesn't really have that much of a life anymore ever since us humans discovered him on Skull Island. And this is fast forward since those events. Other things I can say that are benefits for watching Godzilla vs. King Kong, some interesting human plots, and mainly just being the little girl that King Kong interacts with. Okay, I like her character being a deaf girl that connects with King Kong through sign language. It's very much reminiscent of the Rise of the Planet of the Apes trilogy, which hands down, that's another of my all-time favorite trilogies ever, especially when it comes to monsters, but it's really just regular apes that just kind of take a limitless pill. That's the action sequences when they are in the film. The action sequences are amazing. Okay, 10 out of 10 for the action sequences when they are in it. The director, he knows how to film an action sequence. I will give him that benefit. Above all else, the action sequences in Godzilla vs. King Kong, 10 out of 10. You see each side within each fight. They're gripping, riveting, they're very colorful, they're very bombastic, very epic to scope. They are all around remarkable. I had some editing issues here and there within the action sequences, but definitely nowhere near as much as you would expect. A lot of the times it's panning cameras, and then there are some where they quick shot with editing tools for the camera work, and I don't like those in action sequences. I prefer a one still shot, just kind of tracking everything, kind of like in the first season of True Detectives episode 4, where they're kind of going through the town and it's a one shot. That's the kind of filmmaking that I prefer. That's just an opinion, but I prefer that. But outside of that, though, the action sequences for Godzilla vs. King Kong, just the movie in general, all of the action sequences, they're very easy to follow, and they're very well crafted and made. Unfortunately, that's the end of my praise for Godzilla vs. King Kong. This isn't a terrible film. I want you to understand that. Like I said, I had some really good things to say about this film, but the way they marketed, the way they labeled it, the way they advertised, it's a really disappointing film. Especially considering there are plot twists, especially near the end, where the trailers didn't give you actual answers and prerequisites for those plot twists, but it was implied, and all I'm going to say is yes. So, the negatives that I have with Godzilla vs. King Kong, and there are a lot. Still mostly bland and boring human plots. Okay, I was not interested in literally any of the plot or story pertaining to the humans, other than the little girl's connection with King Kong. I thought that the character stories for the humans, I thought it was very bland, boring, and extremely cliche. Not to mention, there are some parts in the story that just didn't really add up. They felt really illogical, and when it's the human story, there are some parts where it's a little confusing. Some bad plot devices, like whenever it's Godzilla versus King Kong first. Okay, and I'm going to give you some minor spoilers. So, in the first fight and meeting of Godzilla and King Kong, Godzilla flips over the ship that King Kong's strapped to. And that's fine and good and all, and King Kong ends up getting out. But the way he gets out, he doesn't break out or anything. The ship flips over, and one of the human characters, even though the ship is underwater, there's water in the cabin. For some reason, the computers still work to the point where said character shifts down handle and unleashes the chains for King Kong. That's quite illogical for me. It's unrealistic. Most times when electronic devices go into any form of water, especially in that capacity and in that speed, whenever something's being flipped upside down, gravity really does its thing. Electronic devices immediately, usually, don't work anymore. Sometimes, but that's a very odd of a chance for it to still be working. I had an issue with the visuals too, not to the end overall, but it was from after the intro until about the halfway point. I don't know, compared to 2014 Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and King of the Monsters, I thought King of the Monsters looked absolutely ugly throughout. It's kind of the opposite for Godzilla vs. King Kong. The first half of Godzilla vs. King Kong, I don't know, it looked too clean. It looked really colorful and it looked beautiful. But the camera, the filming of it, I don't know, it felt too clean. Kind of like it was way too polished, way too produced. And I'm not saying the special effects, no. I'm just saying like just everything having to do with affecting the camera lens itself. There was not a hint of grain, there wasn't a hint of darkness or anything really. Even when there were supposed to be dark scenes and darkness within lighting, it kind of seemed like everything was just still brightened up. And I'm not saying I want to not be able to see it, some things, but I like whenever films have some unevenness to their lighting effects and color palette. Like, say, Watchmen, for example. Watchmen was very colorful, but also very dark. I like that kind of editing in the color software. Overall, Godzilla vs. King Kong, for what it was meant to be, what it was supposed to be, is an absolute mess. Okay, whenever there are action sequences, they are great. That's when Godzilla vs. King Kong really shines. They did a hell of a job editing and doing the great special effects for the action sequences and the landscapes and the cinematography. Absolutely everything having to do with any kind of action or violent sequence, they did a damn good job producing. Outside of that, it has really bad storytelling. It has really bad story, really bad plot devices. Just everything about the story and plot is just meandering. It's stupid. Even the comedy in this film isn't really that good at all. It's very juvenile. A couple times I started to smile, but that's it. I didn't laugh at all. The human characters, the actors and actresses, they do an okay, not even an acceptable job. They kind of felt to me like they were just kind of going through emotions, excluding the little deaf girl. Okay, she does a better job. Some recurring characters are back in this film from King of Monsters, and some character lineage from Kong Skull Island. But the characters from King of the Monsters, I didn't really like them in King of the Monsters, and guess what? Still don't like them really in Godzilla vs. King Kong. The only exception, as I said, the little young deaf girl that has a bond with King Kong. Everybody else in this film, they just do an okay job. That's really about it. So overall, for me, Godzilla vs. King Kong was a huge disappointment. It was such a wasted potential, because normally I go into any film, action film, drama film, crime film, doesn't matter, you name it, I'm always into a film for its story. Well, guess what? This time I was into Godzilla vs. King Kong for straight up the action sequences and the violent story. And a lot of critics, even YouTube critics, they told you ahead of its release that this is a film centered around Godzilla vs. King Kong. You'll get your money's worth. Guess what? To me, my personal opinion, you don't get your money's worth. The story is very absurd. They still rely a lot on the story of the human characters. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a human story in it, but they needed to focus on Godzilla vs. King Kong for this one film. When I say they focused on them in the action sequences, great, 10 out of 10. But that's not even half of the film. The film looks beautiful, except for my personal critiques on the looks of the first half. They do a damn good job with the special effects, especially in the fight sequences. They do a damn good job with the cinematography, with the layouts, the environments, everything about that. Everything about the action and everything around the action looks great. 10 out of 10. Except for minor editing and color issues that I personally have. But overall, for me, Godzilla vs. King Kong is such a huge waste of potential because of how it was marketed. So Godzilla vs. King Kong for me is a 5 out of 10. Thank you.